I carried the tray of champagne glasses through the ballroom of the Grand Meridian Hotel, watching my former high school classmates celebrate our 10-year reunion. Nobody recognized me in the server's uniform, or maybe they just didn't see service staff as actual people worth noticing. That was exactly what I'd counted on when I decided to work my own reunion instead of attending as a guest. I wanted to see who my former classmates had become when they thought nobody important was watching. Then Blake Whitmore's voice cut through the elegant chatter. "Wait, is that Xavier Brooks? Holy shit, it is you." Every head in the vicinity turned toward me. Blake's face split into a cruel smile as recognition dawned. Xavier Brooks, the guy who was going to change the world. Remember that graduation speech? My name is Xavier Brooks and I'm 28 years old. 10 years ago, I'd given our high school's valedictorian speech about ambition, hard work, and making a difference in the world despite coming from nothing. Blake and his friends had mocked me then and apparently nothing had changed. What Blake didn't know as he called everyone over to witness my failure was that I owned the Grand Meridian Hotel where we were standing. I also owned 6 other luxury hotels across 3 states. And the $5 million anonymous donation that had funded our school's new library, the very reason we were celebrating tonight, had come from my foundation. But I dressed as a server specifically to see who had grown up and who remained cruel. Blake was failing my test spectacularly. Xavier was going to be a tech genius, Blake announced loudly, drawing a crowd. Going to revolutionize education, remember? And now he's serving drinks at our reunion. His girlfriend Sienna Caldwell joined him, her expression dripping with false sympathy. "Oh Xavier, I'm so sorry things didn't work out for you. Life can be so unfair, can't it?" She actually patted my arm like I was a charity case. I maintained my professional server demeanor. "Can I get you anything else this evening?" I asked politely. Sienna laughed, that same mean girl laugh I remembered from high school. "Look how humble he is now. Remember when you used to lecture us about reaching our potential? Guess you found yours at the bottom." She took a photo of me in my uniform, probably already planning to post it online. Other former classmates gathered, their reactions varied. Some looked uncomfortable with Blake and Sienna's cruelty. Others smirked, enjoying the spectacle of the ambitious poor kid, who'd apparently failed. A few I'd been friendly with looked genuinely sympathetic. "It's honest work," said Marcus, who'd been my lab partner senior year. "Leave him alone, Blake." Blake ignored him. "Honest work? This is the guy who turned down full rides to work on his revolutionary app, remember that? What happened to that app, Xavier?" I could have told him that app had sold for $50 million 3 years ago, launching my tech company and subsequent business empire. Instead, I smiled mysteriously. "Things worked out differently than I planned." "I'll say," Sienna snorted. "Well, at least you found employment. Some of us actually succeeded." I excused myself to continue serving, leaving Blake and Sienna to their laughter. This was exactly the information I'd come for, a clear view of who people really were when they thought they held power over someone they perceived as beneath them. As I circulated with champagne, I observed other interactions. Marcus had defended me, earning respect points. Kira, who'd been student body president, treated all the servers with courtesy, saying please and thank you. But Blake and Sienna continued making comments whenever I passed. "Hey Xavier, can you bring more shrimp? That's probably the closest you'll get to the good life now." Their cruelty was consistent and deliberate. By the time I returned to the kitchen, I'd identified exactly who I wanted to help with future opportunities and who would never receive another thought from me. My head of security, Andre, was waiting in the staff area. "How's the social experiment going, boss?" he asked with a grin. Andre had worked with me for 5 years and found the whole situation hilarious. "Exactly as expected," I replied, loosening my bow tie. "Blake Whitmore and Sienna Caldwell haven't changed at all. Still cruel, still shallow, still convinced high school popularity matters." "You ready for the big reveal?" Andre asked. The evening's program included a ceremony recognizing the anonymous donor who'd funded the new library. My foundation director would be making the announcement in 20 minutes. "Almost," I said. "Let me serve one more round. I want Blake and Sienna to really commit to their mockery before they find out the truth." I returned to the ballroom with a fresh tray, positioning myself near the stage area where the ceremony would take place. Blake spotted me immediately. "Xavier, come here, we want a photo." He actually snapped his fingers like I was a pet. I approached with my professional server expression. Blake threw his arm around me while Sienna held up her phone. "This is going on Instagram," she announced. "Remember to tag him, Xavier Brooks, serving up reality checks at the reunion." They laughed like it was the funniest thing ever. Marcus intervened again. "You're being assholes. Stop. We're just having fun," Blake protested. "Xavier doesn't mind, do you, Xavier? You understand it's all in good fun. The thing about bullies is they always frame their cruelty as jokes when confronted." "I understand perfectly," I replied calmly. That seemed to satisfy Blake, who didn't catch the deeper meaning. The lights dimmed and our former principal, Mr. Hayes, took the stage. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this special reunion celebration." The crowd quieted, turning attention to the stage. Mr. Hayes looked older but still had that authoritative presence I remembered. "Tonight we're not just celebrating 10 years since your graduation. We're also dedicating our new library, made possible by an extraordinarily generous donation from an anonymous benefactor." Blake whispered loudly to Sienna, "Probably some rich parent trying to buy their kid's way into a good college." Mr. Hayes continued, "This donation, $5 million, has transformed our school's learning resources and will impact students for generations." Appreciative murmurs rippled through the crowd. $5 million was a staggering sum for a public high school library. "The donor wished to remain anonymous," Mr. Hayes said, "but has agreed to let us share some information tonight. This benefactor is actually one of your classmates, someone who graduated with you 10 years ago." The room erupted in excited whispers. People looked around, trying to guess who among them had become wealthy enough to donate $5 million. Blake's expression showed he was mentally cataloging who'd been rich in high school. Sienna did the same, probably assuming it was someone whose family had money. "This classmate exemplifies what we tried to teach you here," Mr. Hayes continued. "Hard work, integrity, and the belief that education can change lives." My heart rate increased slightly. This was it, the moment I'd been working toward all evening. Our anonymous donor came from humble circumstances. Worked multiple jobs through college. Started a company that transformed educational technology. And never forgot where they came from or the teachers who believed in them. Blake's confident expression faltered slightly. That description didn't match any of the wealthy families from our class. "Tonight, with their permission, I'm honored to reveal that your classmate and benefactor is Xavier Brooks." The silence was absolute and deafening. Every person in that ballroom turned to look at me, still holding my serving tray, still in my uniform. Blake's face went from confusion to shock to horror in rapid succession. Sienna's mouth literally dropped open. Mr. Hayes continued, smiling directly at me. "Xavier, would you please join me on stage?" I set down my tray, removed my server's jacket to reveal the designer suit I wore underneath, and walked toward the stage. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, everyone staring in absolute shock. Some started applauding hesitantly, not quite understanding what was happening. "For those confused," Mr. Hayes explained as I climbed the stairs, "Xavier owns the Grand Meridian Hotel where we're gathered tonight. He also owns 6 other luxury hotels and runs a successful educational technology company. He chose to work as a server this evening as a gesture of humility and respect for all workers." Xavier never forgot his roots. The applause grew louder as understanding dawned. I took the microphone from Mr. Hayes, looking out at my former classmates. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes. I appreciate the kind words." I paused, making eye contact with various people in the crowd. Marcus was grinning proudly. Kira looked delighted. Blake and Sienna appeared frozen in horror. I want to explain why I chose to spend tonight serving rather than attending as a guest. 10 years ago, I came from the poorest family in our school. I wore second-hand clothes, worked after school, and relied on free lunch programs. Some of you were kind despite that. I nodded toward Marcus and Kira. Others used my poverty as entertainment. I didn't need to name Blake and Sienna, everyone knew who I meant. Tonight I wanted to see who we'd all become. Whether success or struggle had changed us. What I learned is that some people still judge others based on perceived status. They treat service workers as less than human, as objects of mockery and condescension. Other people treat everyone with basic respect regardless of job title or social position. I let that sink in. Several people shifted uncomfortably, probably remembering how they'd treated the servers that evening. The library donation isn't about recognition. It's about giving current students the resources I didn't have. Access to technology, books, and learning materials that can change trajectories. Because I remember what it felt like to dream big while everyone told me to be realistic. I glanced at Blake, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. I remember people laughing at my ambitions, treating my dreams like jokes. But I also remember the teachers who believed in me, the classmates who were kind, and the determination that came from having something to prove. So this donation honors those who helped and proves wrong those who doubted. The applause was thunderous now. People stood cheering. Mr. Hayes shook my hand vigorously. Xavier has also established a scholarship program for underprivileged students from our district, he announced. 5 full-ride scholarships annually, prioritizing students who demonstrate ambition despite circumstances. More applause. I stepped back from the microphone ready to leave the stage. But Mr. Hayes had one more announcement. And Xavier has generously offered to cover tonight's entire reunion event as his gift to the class. Everything, the venue, the food, the drinks, courtesy of Xavier Brooks. That revelation caused actual gasps. The Grand Meridian wasn't cheap, and a full event buyout for 200 people was easily 6 figures. I returned to the microphone for a final comment. The people who were kind to servers tonight, who treated everyone with respect regardless of perceived status, I'd love to talk with you later about opportunities at my companies. We're always looking for people with integrity and character. I made deliberate eye contact with Marcus, Kira, and several others who'd been respectful. Then I looked directly at Blake and Sienna. Those who chose cruelty and mockery tonight have shown exactly who they are. Thank you for making that clear. I left the stage to standing ovation. The rest of the evening became a blur of apologies, congratulations, and networking. People who'd ignored me as a server suddenly remembered we'd been such good friends in high school. I was polite but distant with the opportunists. Blake and Sienna tried to approach me multiple times, but I made myself unavailable. They'd shown their true characters, and no amount of backtracking would change what I'd witnessed. Marcus found me during a quiet moment. That was incredible, man. I had no idea you'd done so well. I keep a low profile, I explained. The work matters more than the recognition. The way you handled Blake and Sienna was perfect, Marcus grinned. They're spiraling over there, trying to figure out how to apologize their way out of being total assholes. I glanced across the room where Blake and Sienna stood together, clearly distressed. I'm not interested in their apologies, I told Marcus honestly. They're only sorry they mocked someone successful. If I'd actually been a struggling server, their cruelty would have been fine in their minds. That tells me everything I need to know about their character. Marcus nodded understanding. For what it's worth, I always knew you'd do something amazing. You were the smartest person in our class and the hardest worker. I appreciate that, I said sincerely. Actually, I meant what I said about opportunities. I'm expanding my tech company and need a chief technology officer. You were brilliant in engineering. Interested? Marcus's eyes widened. Seriously? You're offering me a job? I'm offering you an interview, I corrected. But yeah, I'm serious. Send me your resume and we'll talk details. We exchanged contact information, and I made similar offers to 3 other former classmates who demonstrated integrity that evening. Kira approached next, looking slightly nervous. Xavier, I just wanted to say congratulations. What you've built is really impressive. Thank you, Kira. I remember you were always kind to everyone in school. That hasn't changed. I noticed you were one of the few people thanking servers by name tonight. She smiled. My mom was a server for years. I know how hard that work is and how invisibly people treat them. That kind of empathy is rare, I observed. I'm launching a nonprofit focused on educational equity. Would you be interested in discussing a leadership role? I remember you were passionate about social justice. Kira's face lit up. I'd love that. I've been working in nonprofit management but looking for something with broader impact. We made plans to meet the following week to discuss details. Throughout these conversations, I was aware of Blake and Sienna hovering nearby, trying to find an opening to approach. Finally, Blake worked up the courage. Xavier, man, can we talk? I turned to face him, my expression neutral. What about? I want to apologize, Blake said, his voice uncharacteristically humble. What I said earlier, the jokes about you serving, that was way out of line. I didn't know who you were. You knew exactly who I was, I corrected. You remembered my name, my graduation speech, my background. What you didn't know was whether I had money or power. And when you thought I didn't, you felt comfortable being cruel. Blake's face reddened. I was just joking around. I didn't mean anything by it. Yes, you did, I replied calmly. You meant to humiliate someone you perceived as beneath you. You meant to feel superior at someone else's expense. Sienna jumped in. We both feel terrible about it. If you'd known I was successful, you would have treated me differently, I finished. That's the problem, Sienna. Your kindness shouldn't depend on someone's bank account or status. The fact that you only regret mocking me after learning I'm wealthy says everything. That's not fair, Sienna protested. Everyone makes mistakes. Mistakes are accidental, I said. You deliberately took photos to mock me on social media. You called people over to witness my supposed failure. That wasn't a mistake, it was calculated cruelty. Blake tried another approach. Look, high school was complicated for all of us. Maybe I was an asshole back then, but people change. I've changed. Have you? I challenged. Because 2 hours ago you were the same bully you were at 18. The only thing that's changed is your target became someone you can't afford to antagonize. The truth of that statement hung in the air between us. Blake had no response because we both knew I was right. I think we're done here, I said, turning to leave. Wait, Sienna called desperately. Could we at least? I mean, I'm looking for work right now, and if you're hiring, I couldn't help but laugh. You think after mocking me publicly, taking photos to humiliate me, and showing zero genuine remorse, I'd consider hiring you? I said I was sorry, Sienna insisted. Being sorry isn't enough when your apology only exists because you got caught treating someone poorly who turned out to be important. You're not sorry you were cruel. You're sorry I'm successful. I walked away, leaving them to process that reality. The rest of the evening was more pleasant. I connected with former classmates I'd lost touch with, made several job offers to people who demonstrated good character, and genuinely enjoyed celebrating our 10-year milestone. Andre appeared at my elbow during a quiet moment. Ready to reclaim your role as hotel owner rather than mysterious server? Definitely, I laughed. This experiment was enlightening but exhausting. You proved your point though, Andre observed. Half the room is having existential crises about how they treat service workers, and Blake Whitmore looks like he's aged 5 years in one night. I glanced across the room where Blake sat alone, nursing a drink and looking miserable. He made his choices. I just held up a mirror. The reunion ended around midnight. As guests departed, many stopped to thank me again for the library donation, the event sponsorship, and the inspiring story. Mr. Hayes pulled me aside for a private conversation. Xavier, what you did tonight was powerful. Not just the donation but the lesson you taught about character and respect. I learned those lessons from teachers like you, I replied sincerely. You never treated me differently because my family was poor. You saw potential and encouraged it. Mr. Hayes smiled. You were impossible not to encourage. Brilliant, hardworking, and determined. But I'll admit I worried about you back then. The bullying you faced from students like Blake was relentless. It motivated me, I admitted. Every time someone said I'd fail, I worked harder to prove them wrong. Blake actually did me a favor by being consistently awful. He gave me something to prove. Still, I'm sorry we didn't protect you better from that treatment. You did what you could. And look how it turned out. I'm successful, happy, and using my resources to help students like I was. Blake, meanwhile, looks miserable despite being the popular one in high school. Mr. Hayes chuckled. Success truly is the best revenge. After he left, I changed out of my work clothes into my regular suit and met with my hotel management team to debrief the evening. Everything ran smoothly, my general manager reported. The guests were pleased and your reveal was perfectly timed. Any issues I should know about? Just one guest, Blake Whitmore, who tried to charge his bar tab to your account after the reveal. Said you two were old friends and you wouldn't mind. I shook my head in disbelief. What did you do? Declined, obviously. He made a scene about it, actually. Security had to intervene. Of course Blake had tried to take advantage. Even after being exposed, he still thought he could exploit our connection. Make a note in our system that Blake Whitmore and Sienna Caldwell are not to receive any courtesy upgrades or special treatment at any of our properties. My general manager nodded, making the notation. Anything else? Yes, actually. The servers who worked tonight, I want bonuses for all of them. Double their usual rate for evening events. They handled a complicated situation with professionalism. I'll process that immediately, she confirmed. I left the hotel around 2 a.m., exhausted but satisfied. The experiment had been worth it. I'd identified good people to help and toxic people to avoid. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number as I got into my car. This is Blake. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to explain. Things have been really hard for me lately. My business failed, my fiancée left, I'm living with my parents. Seeing you working as a server made me feel better about my own failures. I took my frustration out on you and that was wrong. If there's any chance of forgiveness, I'd appreciate it. I stared at the message, processing his words. His apology was more honest than before, acknowledging his motivations rather than just excusing his behavior. But honesty about why you were cruel doesn't erase the cruelty. I typed a response, I appreciate the honesty, Blake. But understanding why you mocked me doesn't change that you did it. You saw someone you thought was struggling and chose to make their struggle worse for your own ego boost. That's not the kind of person I want in my life, professionally or personally. I hope you find success and happiness, but it won't involve me. I hit send and blocked his number. Some bridges aren't worth rebuilding. The next morning, I woke to discover Sienna had posted on social media, not the mocking photo she'd taken, but a lengthy post about learning hard lessons about character and treating everyone with respect. The post carefully didn't mention my name but was clearly about our encounter. It read like damage control, trying to get ahead of the story before others who'd witnessed the evening shared their versions. Several former classmates had already posted about the reunion, many mentioning the generous library donation and the powerful lesson about not judging people by appearances. Kira had posted, "Incredible reunion last night. One of our classmates showed us all what success with integrity looks like. Grateful for the reminder that how you treat people when you think they can't help you reveals your true character." Marcus posted more directly, "Shout out to Xavier Brooks for the amazing library donation and for being the same good person he was in high school. Some people peak at 18. Others are just getting started." The responses to these posts were overwhelmingly positive, with many people sharing their own stories of being judged unfairly or underestimated. A few people defended Blake and Sienna, arguing that everyone deserves second chances and that cancel culture had gone too far. I didn't engage with any of it, letting the court of public opinion sort itself out without my input. My foundation director called mid-morning. "Xavier, we've received 17 new donation offers since last night. People heard about the library and want to contribute to our scholarship fund." "That's fantastic," I said, genuinely pleased. The goal had never been recognition, but if my visibility encouraged others to support education, that was a positive outcome. "Also, we've had multiple media outlets request interviews. How do you want to handle press?" I considered. Publicity could help the foundation's mission, but I also valued privacy. "Decline individual interviews, but let's draft a press release about the library donation and scholarship program. Focus on the cause, not on me personally." Over the following weeks, the reunion story took on a life of its own. Someone had recorded my speech on their phone, and the video went viral. Millions of views across social media platforms. Comments ranged from supportive, "This is what real success looks like," to critical, "Rich guy humiliates former classmates for entertainment." I didn't respond to any of it, but the attention brought unexpected benefits. Applications to our scholarship program increased dramatically. Other schools reached out requesting information about replicating the program. Several businesses contacted me about partnerships and investments. 3 months after the reunion, Marcus officially joined my company as Chief Technology Officer. Kira took the nonprofit leadership position. Both were thriving in their new roles and had become genuine friends, not just colleagues. I occasionally heard updates about Blake and Sienna through the social network of former classmates. Blake had apparently moved to another state for a fresh start, working in sales for a small company. Sienna was working retail and reportedly still bitter about the reunion incident. Neither had reached out again, which was fine with me. 6 months post-reunion, Mr. Hayes invited me back to the school for the library's official opening. I accepted, curious to see the finished space. The renovation was stunning. Modern technology, comfortable study areas, and a massive collection of diverse books and resources. "This is incredible," I told Mr. Hayes, genuinely moved. "The students are already benefiting tremendously," he replied. "Test scores are up, library usage has tripled, and teachers report increased engagement with research projects." We walked through the space together and I felt a sense of completion. This was what the success had been for, not the money, not the status, but the ability to create opportunities for others. "Xavier, can I ask you something personal?" Mr. Hayes said. "Of course. Do you regret the confrontation with Blake and Sienna at the reunion? Some people have criticized your approach as unnecessarily harsh." I thought carefully before responding. "I don't regret it. They weren't going to learn from gentle correction. They'd been cruel for 10 years without consequences. Sometimes people need to face the direct results of their behavior." Was it harsh? Maybe. But it was honest. Mr. Hayes nodded slowly. "I suppose you're right. And you didn't expose them publicly, they exposed themselves through their own actions." "Exactly. I just created circumstances where their true character became visible." A student approached us hesitantly. "Excuse me, are you Xavier Brooks?" "I am," I confirmed. I just wanted to say thank you. I'm one of the scholarship recipients, and without this program, I wouldn't be able to afford college. The students' gratitude was worth more than any social media praise or business success. 1 year after the reunion, I was invited back for a special assembly recognizing scholarship recipients. 12 students from underprivileged backgrounds were receiving full-ride college scholarships through my foundation. I gave a brief speech about my own journey and encouraged them to dream big despite circumstances. After the assembly, a teacher I didn't recognize approached me. "Mr. Brooks, I wanted to thank you for what you're doing. I teach some of these scholarship students, and the change in their confidence and motivation has been remarkable." "That's wonderful to hear," I replied. "Education changes everything, not just careers but how people see themselves and their possibilities." The teacher hesitated, then added, "I also wanted to say that what happened at your reunion, the way you handled that situation, has become a teaching moment in my social studies class. We discuss it as an example of character, consequences, and how we treat people we perceive as having less power." I was surprised and a bit uncomfortable with that. I'm not sure I should be held up as an example. I was fairly harsh with those classmates. "You were honest," the teacher corrected. "And you demonstrated that cruelty has consequences, even if those consequences are social rather than legal. My students need to understand that how they treat others matters, not just morally but practically." Blake and Sienna learned that lesson the hard way. I suppose there was value in that perspective. The incident had certainly been educational for everyone involved. 2 years after the reunion, my company had grown significantly. We'd opened 3 new hotels, expanded the tech division, and increased our scholarship program to 50 annual recipients. Marcus and Kira were both promoted, leading their respective divisions successfully. I'd also started dating someone I'd met through business connections. Someone who appreciated both my success and my values. Life had moved forward in every positive way. I rarely thought about Blake or Sienna anymore. They'd become footnotes in my story rather than main characters. Until I received an unexpected letter. It was from Blake, forwarded through my company's legal department. The letter was long and handwritten, which suggested genuine effort. Blake wrote about hitting rock bottom after the reunion, losing his apartment, struggling with depression, eventually seeking therapy. He detailed realizing how much of his identity had been wrapped up in his high school glory days and how lost he'd felt when that wasn't enough. "I'm not writing to ask for anything," the letter concluded. "I'm writing because therapy helped me understand what you meant that night about character and respect. You were right about everything. I was cruel because I felt small and wanted to make someone else smaller. That's pathetic, and I'm ashamed it took public humiliation to see it. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that your words, harsh as they felt at the time, woke me up. I'm working on becoming a better person. I volunteer at a youth center now, trying to help kids who remind me of you at that age. Kids with big dreams and limited resources. I tell them their circumstances don't define their potential. I learned that from you, even though I learned it the hard way." The letter was signed simply, Blake Whitmore. I read it 3 times, processing my reaction. The letter felt genuine in ways his previous apologies hadn't. Therapy and time had apparently created real self-awareness and change. I discussed it with Marcus over lunch. "What do you think I should do?" "That depends," Marcus said. "Do you want Blake back in your life in any capacity?" "No," I answered honestly. "But I also don't want to hold on to anger or resentment. Maybe acknowledging his growth is enough closure. Then respond briefly. Acknowledge his letter, wish him well, and leave it there. You don't owe him more than that, but you also don't have to stay angry." I took Marcus's advice and sent a short response. "Blake, I received your letter and appreciate the honest reflection. I'm glad you're working on yourself and helping young people. That's meaningful work. I wish you continued growth and success. Take care, Xavier." I didn't offer friendship or connection, but I also didn't hold on to bitterness. It felt like the right balance. 3 years after the reunion, I was invited to speak at my high school's career day. I shared my journey from poverty to success, emphasizing education, hard work, and treating people with respect regardless of their position. During Q&A, a student asked, "Is it true you worked as a server at your own reunion to test people?" The story had become local legend apparently. "It's true," I confirmed. "I wanted to see who people really were when they thought I couldn't help or hurt them. How someone treats service workers, people they perceive as having less power, reveals their character." "What did you learn?" another student asked. "I learned that some people grow up and others just get older. I learned that kindness and cruelty both have long-term consequences. And I learned that success is ultimately about character, not status. A teacher added her perspective. Mr. Brooks's story demonstrates that the choices you make now about how you treat others will follow you throughout your life. The students who mocked him in high school faced consequences 10 years later. Your character is your lasting legacy. After the presentation, several students approached me with questions about scholarships, career paths, and opportunities. I gave each of them my time and attention, remembering how meaningful adult support had been for me at their age. One student, clearly poor based on worn clothes and nervousness, asked quietly, "Do people like me really have a chance? Sometimes it feels like success is only for people who start with advantages." I knelt down to her eye level. I wore secondhand clothes through high school. I worked nights at a grocery store to help my mom with rent. I was exactly where you are now. The difference between people who make it and people who don't isn't starting point, it's determination and willingness to work when it's hard. Her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for saying that. And for the scholarships. I'm going to apply." "I hope you do," I encouraged. "And regardless of whether you get the scholarship, remember that your circumstances don't define your potential." I'm proof of that. 5 years after the reunion, I was recognized by a business magazine as one of the region's most successful entrepreneurs under 40. The profile detailed my company growth, philanthropic work, and the unusual story of working my own reunion as a server. The magazine interviewed several people from that night, including Marcus and Kira, who spoke glowingly about my character and leadership. They also reached out to Blake and Sienna for comment. Blake declined to be interviewed but sent a statement. "Xavier Brooks showed me what real success looks like, not wealth or status but integrity and using your resources to help others. I deeply regret how I treated him and am grateful for the lesson he taught me, however painful it was at the time." Sienna also declined an interview, but her statement was more defensive. "The reunion incident was taken out of context. I made a mistake in judgment, but I don't believe I deserved the public humiliation that followed." Her statement revealed she still didn't fully grasp what had happened or her responsibility for it. When the magazine asked me about both statements, I kept my response diplomatic. People's reactions to consequences reveal whether they've actually learned from their mistakes. Some grow, some don't. I'm focused on the people who demonstrate positive growth. The article generated significant positive attention for my businesses and foundation. Scholarship applications doubled, business partnerships increased, and I received invitations to speak at conferences about entrepreneurship, philanthropy, and workplace culture. 7 years after the reunion, I returned for our class's 15-year reunion. This time I attended as a guest, no disguises or tests needed. The event was at the same hotel, my hotel, but I'd arranged for someone else to own the business that evening while I simply enjoyed time with former classmates. The atmosphere was noticeably different from 10 years prior. People were more settled in their lives, more comfortable with who they'd become. There was less posturing and more genuine conversation. Marcus and Kira attended with me, both having become close friends over the years. "Think Blake will show up?" Marcus wondered as we entered. "Doubtful," I replied. "I'd be surprised if he even lives in the area anymore." I was wrong. Blake arrived about an hour into the event, looking nervous but determined. He'd changed significantly, dressed more modestly, carried himself with less arrogance, seemed genuinely humbled by life. He approached me directly. "Xavier, I know I'm probably the last person you want to see. Actually, I'm glad you came," I said honestly. "I heard you've been doing good work with at-risk youth." Blake looked surprised. "You heard about that?" "I pay attention to people's growth," I explained. "Mr. Hayes mentioned you've been volunteering at the youth center for several years now. That's meaningful." "It's the least I could do," Blake said. "After how I treated you and others like you. I'm trying to help kids avoid becoming the person I was." We talked for about 20 minutes. A real conversation, not the performative apology from years before. Blake shared about his therapy, his work with young people, his rebuilt life that was smaller but more authentic than before. "I'm not asking to be friends," Blake clarified. "I just wanted you to know that what you said that night changed my life. It took a while to accept, but you were right about everything." "I appreciate you telling me that," I responded. "And I'm genuinely glad you've grown. That's what matters." Sienna also attended the reunion but kept her distance from me. She'd apparently married someone wealthy and was living off his success, which seemed fitting. She hadn't grown or changed, just found a new source of status to cling to. The 15-year reunion was pleasant and drama-free. I connected with more former classmates, several of whom had followed my career and expressed admiration for what I'd built. The mockery and judgment from 10 years earlier had been replaced with respect and curiosity. Continue 11:03 p.m. During his speech, Mr. Hayes specifically mentioned my continued support of the school. Xavier Brooks exemplifies what we hope for all our graduates: success that includes helping others, integrity in business dealings, and giving back to the community that shaped you. The library, scholarships, and mentorship programs he's established have transformed countless students' trajectories. The applause was genuine and warm. Looking around the room, I felt a sense of completion. The journey from poor kid with big dreams to successful entrepreneur who could help others achieve their dreams felt meaningful in ways that money alone never could. 10 years after the original reunion, I was invited to give the keynote address at our high school's graduation, 20 years after I'd given the valedictorian speech that Blake had mocked. Standing on that stage, looking at the graduating class, I reflected on how much had changed and how much remained the same. 20 years ago, I stood on this stage and talked about changing the world. I began. A lot of people thought that was naive or arrogant for a poor kid to say. What I've learned is that changing the world doesn't require being special or gifted. It requires showing up, working hard, treating people with respect, and using whatever success you achieve to help others. I shared the reunion story, all of it, including being mocked as a server and the eventual reveal. The students listened intently, and I could see many relating to different parts of the story. The lesson isn't that I'm special because I became successful, I explained. The lesson is that your character matters more than your circumstances. How you treat people when you think they can't help you reveals who you really are. Blake and Sienna learned that the hard way. But also know that growth is possible. Blake has spent years working to become a better person, and that matters too. It's never too late to change, but it's also never too early to get it right the first time. I concluded by announcing an expansion of the scholarship program, now offering 75 annual full-ride scholarships to students from disadvantaged backgrounds. This school gave me teachers who believed in me when I had nothing else. I want to ensure that continues for generations. Your circumstances don't define your potential. Your choices define your character, and your character defines your legacy. The standing ovation was overwhelming. After the ceremony, dozens of students approached me with questions, gratitude, and excitement about the scholarships. Their energy and hope reminded me why all the hard work had been worth it. That evening, I received a text from an unknown number. Xavier, this is Blake. I was at the graduation ceremony today, volunteering with the youth center group. Your speech was incredible. Thank you for mentioning that growth is possible. That meant more than you know. I hope you're well. Blake. I responded, thanks Blake. I'm glad you were there. Keep doing the good work with those kids. It matters. It wasn't friendship, but it was peace, which felt like the right conclusion to that chapter of my life. As I reflected on the journey from that mocking reunion to now, I realized the experience had shaped me in unexpected ways. It had tested whether success would make me bitter or generous, whether I'd hold grudges or allow growth, whether I'd use power to punish or to help. I'd chosen generosity, allowed for growth while maintaining boundaries, and used success to create opportunities rather than exact revenge. That felt like the real victory, not the money or recognition, but the person I'd become through it all. 12 years after the original reunion, my company had grown to 15 hotels, multiple tech ventures, and a foundation that now provided over 100 full scholarships annually. Marcus was now COO of the entire operation, and Kira had taken the foundation to national scale. I'd married, had 2 young children, and built a life that felt authentic and meaningful. I rarely thought about Blake and Sienna anymore except when telling the reunion story in speeches. They'd served their purpose, teaching me about character, consequences, and the importance of staying true to your values regardless of others' treatment. The mockery that had stung so deeply that night had ultimately been the catalyst for clarity about who deserved space in my life and how I wanted to use my success. 15 years after being mocked for serving drinks at my own reunion, I stood in the completed school library bearing my name, not because I'd asked for recognition, but because the school board had insisted. The Xavier Brooks Educational Resource Center was filled with students reading, researching, and dreaming about their futures. Mr. Hayes, now retired but still involved with the school, stood beside me. You know, when you gave that valedictorian speech 25 years ago about changing the world, I believed you. Even when others doubted. You were one of the few, I recalled. That support mattered more than you probably realized. Looking at this library, the scholarship program, the hundreds of students whose lives you've changed, I'd say you delivered on that promise to change the world. I watched a young girl, probably from a family like mine had been, studying intently at one of the modern computer stations. The world isn't changed by one person doing something massive, I reflected. It's changed by people who had opportunities using their success to create opportunities for others. That's the real revolution. As we left the library that evening, I thought about the journey from that humiliating moment at the reunion to standing in a building named after me, surrounded by evidence of impact and legacy. Blake and Sienna had mocked me for serving drinks, thinking they'd found proof of my failure. Instead, they'd revealed their own limitations while I demonstrated that success is about character, not status. My former classmates had mocked me for being a waiter at our reunion, taking photos and making jokes at my expense. They had no idea they were celebrating my generosity, standing in my hotel, about to hear that I'd donated $5 million to our school. The reveal had been satisfying, but the real satisfaction came from everything after. The students helped, the lives changed, the legacy built. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building something so meaningful that the people who mocked you become footnotes in your story while you become a chapter in theirs. That's exactly what I'd done, and I'd do it all again without hesitation.